IGNOU DCE-01 General Principles of Writing. Block 1st, Unit 1st. Introduction. 1.0 Aims and Objective. Writing is an art, and more so creative writing, which is an expression of your creative urge. You will find this course not only informative but also stimulative of your creative impulse, in which respect it differs from all other courses. This course not only discusses the various aspects of creative writing but also helps you mold yourself into a writer. In the first unit of your creative writing course, certain fundamental ideas are discussed. It starts with the assumption that writing is a social act and that man writes because he must share with others what he thinks and feels. Further, it informs you that the distinction between creative and non-creative writing is that between informing and revealing. The content of writing chooses the only form appropriate to it. The essence of content is experience transformed in the mind of the writer. Structure is basically the ordering of material. Style is that handling of language which expresses the content best. An aspiring writer should read extensively and with discrimination, allow his experience to mature, strike out his own path, that is, write something individual, different. Begin with keeping a private diary of thoughts and experiences, then visualize the course of work clearly and try to achieve maximum clarity, precision, directness, and a sense of economy. You must not only be your own critique, but should also submit your work to discerning friends for criticism. 1.1 Introduction. Man is a social animal. Once his primary needs such as food, shelter, and clothing are met, it becomes necessary for him to fulfill the social need of communication. He must communicate with other human beings not only to seek and impart information, but also to share with them his experiences, his joys and sorrows. The signal man makes through speech, actions, or artistic creation have all this common purpose to be understood by others. Early man expressed himself through the gestures with his hands and face. This was the first mode of communication available to him. Man could also produce mutually unconnected grunts and groans to express his basic emotions like anger and satisfaction. This was another mode of communication for him. With the passage of time, with developing intelligence, he began to connect one sound with another and turn his grunts and groans into sound patterns. These patterns, with specific meanings attached to each and understood by all in the group, became speech. However, both gestures and speech had severe limitations. These could be useful only when members of the group were in close proximity. 1.2 The birth of writing and its importance. Imagine a situation like this. A woman with her children is away collecting wood for the fire, and a man resting in front of the cave suddenly spots a wild boar which he has to chase away or hunt. How will he tell his woman where he has gone? Out of such situation came the first cave drawings, and from these ideographs, when these were found inadequate, alphabets which could reproduce human speech phonetically were gradually devised. Herein lies the genesis of writing, which can broadly be defined as a system of human intercommunication by means of visible conventional markings. The earliest efforts at writing, about 6,000 years ago, were made in Egypt and Mesopotamia. They are etchings on clay tablets called cuneiforms. Starting with them, man continued to improve his methods of writing. He devised several others, things like parchment, birch bark, and finally paper. If the entire span of time from the birth of first well-defined Neanderthal man 300,000 years ago to the present time is reduced to a time scale of 50 years, writing has been in the vogue only in the last 1 year or less. Yet the strides which human civilization has made in this 1 year of time scale have been greater than in the rest of man's history. If it is so, the credit for it must go to one single factor, that is writing. For writing means communication, and communication means progress. In the whole of human history, there has been nothing more glorious than writing to explore oneself and to express oneself. If writing had not been invented, we would not have knowledge anything of the past, anything of other places or people. We would have continued to live in utter ignorance of one another in our isolated little holes. Why does one write? There could be some easy and yet inadequate answer to this question, such as money, vanity, or drive for fame. All these might be true to some extent, but basically and more importantly, the answer lies in the urge of the writer to communicate a thought or a feeling, that is, to express himself. As T.S. Eliot has said, you write because you feel the need to free yourself of something. This means that it is psychological and aesthetic compulsion. It also becomes a social need when you write about for other people as a novel or a short story, so as to be able to establish a bond with them. As for the reader, when he goes through the work of a master, he will be entering a new world with its unique social situation, characters, and emotions. 1.3 Type of writing and their functions. All writings can be broadly classified into two categories, creative and non creative. Let us first consider the non creative writing. It deals with ideas and its purpose is to inform, it adds to your information and widens your knowledge. Books on history, religion, and science, etc., belong to this category. In order to achieve best this purpose of informing, the writer will have to be analytical in his approach and present his arguments methodically and lucidly so that his writing is easy to comprehend. On the other hand, creative writing is almost a spiritual activity. Its purpose is not to inform but to reveal. A highly creative writer meditates on either concrete things of the world or in abstract thoughts like love or divinity and pours out his feelings in his writing. Or bringing his unique imagination into play, he may interact with life around and write about social situations and events so as to lighten, uplift, and transport in a manner all his own, as in the novel or a short story. You can sense his individual vision in his writing. Although on the basis of subject matter, all writings can be divided into creative and non-creative. It is not unusual that a highly imaginative writer can produce a non-creative work in a creative manner. And such a work uplifts even as it informs. For instance, Maurice Maeterlinck wrote The Life of B, almost like creative work, its language touching the fringes of poetry. Conversely, in the hands of an ordinary writer, even a novel or a short story can make very dull reading, duller than any non-creative work. 1.4 The substance of writing. Every literary work, big or small, essentially consists of four aspects. 1.4.1 Content. The essence of content is experience. The experience is what one acquires from the life around through one's senses by observing things that happen. No writer can possibly write in a vacuum. He would have seen life around him in its various situations, happy and sad, harsh and poignant, and he would have made mental notes of everything. When suddenly it occurs to him to write a story with a certain events as its center, with a particular set of characters, the right elements which he had once accumulated in his mind and which have in the meanwhile undergone strange transformation within him, will begin tumbling out of their own accord and take a new life on paper. Even when one invents a story, its elements would somewhere resemble the real. Otherwise, the writing will lack credibility and authenticity, which are discussed in Unit 3 of Block-1. A well-written work should always give the reader the feeling that it is real. It should never make him say, "Oh, how could this ever happen?" Hence, it is necessary for a writer to keep his eyes and ears open and closely observe the life around so as to be able to stock those images for use in future. 1.4.2 Form. Form has two meanings. Firstly, literary form, and secondly, structural form. As for the literary form, the content itself generally decides what form should take. Whether a particular insight should come out of a story or a novel, or its nature and the quality are such that nothing but a poem expresses it full if it's not generally decided consciously. It comes on its own with the idea of writing itself. Occasionally, the writer may be in a dilemma and has to decide, taking all the factors into consideration, which form to choose. 1.4.3 Structure. As for its structural sense, the guiding principle should be easy communication for easy comprehension. In order to achieve a good structure, the writer should first of all order his material. That is, decide A. How much of what should be in the work, and B. In what order. Logic, common sense, and experience drawn from one's wide reading will help here. Just as a 500-page novel cannot be managed with only 2 characters, an 8-page story cannot have 24 characters unless the writer is a genius. One cannot go on describing the locale of a story for 7 pages, reserving all the actions and denouncement to the last page. As for the order, the Aristotelian beginning, middle, and end is a time-tested sequence, but a gifted writer can always make variations. Literary traditions has provided us with several acceptable models, but if the writer is innovative, he can create newer models. It is important to bear in mind, however, that ultimately structure is only a means to an end, and one should choose only that in which the content comes through best. In its totality, a piece of writing is like a work of architecture, where every stone is well cut and fits into the other, as if the two of other are one piece. Nothing in it should stick out. The total structure should make an aesthetically satisfying whole. The stone metaphor above applies to every single element of writing. First the word, then the sentence, the paragraph, and the chapter, and finally the book itself. Each word in a sentence should work like the right musical note, and each sentence like a bar, and the book as a whole like a symphony, harmonious in its total orchestration. 1.4.4 Style. Then comes style. It is possibly that two works written on the same subject or with the same theme should both be structurally satisfying, yet stylistically one may be better than the other. Style is a manner of expressing one's thoughts and feelings in words. It is a result of long cultivated awareness of words and sentences, of the way a writer connects one sentence with another. For one writer, succor may be acceptable, while help may be more appropriate. Procrastination is tongue twisting, while delay is more expressive. For many, more than two adjectives at time may be bad at writing, but for a poet like Walt Whitman, a chain of them was a normal. Style is a very personal thing. It identifies the writer. 1.5 Some tips to an aspiring writer. Writing is not something which do it yourself book can teach. No one can teach another how to become a writer. What you get from others, for that matter from this unit, are only a few tips based on experience. 1.5.1 Read in order to write. For anyone who aspires to become a writer, the first requirement is to be a good reader. One can learn a lot from reading the best in all literatures. Perhaps there is no one in the world who has become a writer without having read a single word of that what others have written. When we talk of reading, we do not mean reading casually for entertainment or because there is nothing better to do. What really matters is reading critically, analyzing for oneself every detail of the work, asking questions at every step as to why the writer has devised his plot in a particular manner or has made characters act the way they do, and whether it could have been done in any other way. Long years of close reading in this manner builds up a writer's equipment. It increases his vocabulary. It often provides ready answers to the questions which crop up in the process of writing. The subject of writing should occur to the writer spontaneously, either coming from inside or as a sudden reaction into something encountered in the outside world. This is what makes for inspired writing. You should not sit down to write with the questions like what should I write? 1.5.2 Allow your experience to ripen. The experience which you draw from the life around you should not be put on paper as it is. That would make it a mere matter of fact, hackneyed piece of journalism. You should learn to make that experience your own by internalizing it. Should allow it to gestate within your mind, in the process of which you may reject a few details and add a few others from the similar experiences. This kind of gestation will also make it personal, intimate, and authentic. Hence, it is not desirable to rush for pen and paper as soon as there is a desire to write. We have used the word gestation. The act of writing is like giving a birth to something. It should come out of its own after it is ripe enough and when it can no longer wait. It serves no purpose to wrench it out by force. Write about your experience differently. Before writing about anything, you should ask yourself whether it is something tried which others have already written about or something new. If it is new, there is nothing like it. If it is not, that a writer can always hit upon a new things to write about. Life does not have a new theme to offer every day to everyone. It is the same birth, the same hunger, the same love, and the same death, always. But though the themes are few and limited, the variations are unlimited. Here lies the scope for an imaginative mind. You'll have to ask yourself whether you can write about the same old thing differently, bringing your own insights and perceptions into it. 1.5.4 Start with your diary. Before launching out on more ambitious projects like short stories and novels, it is best to start with your own diary and reminiscences. A few months of consistent writing of the diary for your private reading will give you confidence to undertake more difficult types of writing later on. 1.5.5 Visualization, Outline and Design. Once you have the basic idea of what you want to write and you are convinced that it will make a fairly good literary work, keep thinking about all its aspects such as the theme, plot, situations, characters, dialogues, etc. Jot down every small detail that occurs to you, then put down everything sequentially and prepare an outline to show how it will start, develop and end. Before finally putting pen to paper, you should have a clear picture in your mind of the entire work. This is called visualization. There are many gifted writers who, at the time of starting, have only a vague idea of what they are going to write. But as they proceed, the unconscious mind takes over and the writing takes very different turns and twists to produce very interesting results. This method may not be advisable for the beginner. The beginning and the end of a work are vital as in a musical piece. The first few pages are like a leash, and you should be able to hold the readers with it and lead them on. In fact, there are some readers who, if they do not find the first and last few paragraphs interesting enough, would just put down the book. 1.5.6 Some do's and don'ts. If there is any single quality which distinguishes most great works, it is clarity. Clarity of thought and clarity of expression. Your writing should not be dense or dull, but should be shine like a mirror. Precision is another such quality. Precision both in respect of your thoughts and the words you use to express them. Word is God. Take your words seriously. Do not waste them. When you use a word, make sure of its precise meaning. Tools like the dictionary, thesaurus, etc. will help you to understand the correct meaning of words and their usage. Do not overwrite. The days of ornate prose are over. It is possible to achieve miracles even with these simple sentences. No wonder Bible is still considered a model of good writing. Similarly, avoid being pompous. Don't be very flippant either. Choose your words and expressions according to the mood of your work. Also, avoid archaism, that is, word no longer in vogue, slang, cliches, and jargon. Write as it comes to you effortlessly. Length, that is, how much to write, is yet another important factor. The length will be determined by the scope of the subject. If you are clear in your mind about what you want to say, the end will come where it should. Do not try to explain too much. Leave something to the reader's imagination also. Let your writing be sprightly. A touch of humor, if it is not against the basic mood of your work, is always welcome. 1.5.7 Learn to be your own critique. After you have written a piece, read it aloud to yourself and test it on your ears. You will find several false notes both in your statements and expressions. You will be surprised that quite a few things which you found exciting when you first put them on paper now seem banned. Remove them mercilessly. Every writer should learn to be his own critique. Once your first draft is ready, put it aside till such times as it is out of your mind. It may have to be for a week, a fortnight, or a month or more. Now read it again. You will then see it in a fresh light. At places, it may even make you wonder how you could have been so silly as to write certain things. There will be more work for you, and the typed pages will fill with corrections, but you should not be dismayed. 1.5.8 Seek others' opinions. For every writer, it is important to build up a close circle of creative writers and discriminating readers who are on the same wavelength and can read through his manuscript patiently and give an honest, unbiased opinion about it. It is necessary to shed one's shyness to be able to show one's work to others and also curb one's ego to consider their criticism, however drastic it might be. But in the end, it will be good for the work. If even after all this a work fails to pass muster, better forget about it rather than hunt for a publisher. The world will not be poorer by that one work which failed to come out. You can always make it up with your next work. Summing up, man tries to fulfill not only his primary needs like food, clothing, and shelter, but also his social needs of communication with others so as to share his experiences. It is urge to communicate with others that has given rise to various forms of communications: gestures, signals, speech, artistic creation, ideographs, and finally writing. But for the writing, we would not have only known anything of the past or places and other people. One writes primarily to express oneself and not necessarily for money and fame. Writing are of two types, non-creative and creative, the former to inform and the latter to reveal. The three essential aspects of a literary work are content, form, and structure. Style is the way in which one work is expressed, the manipulation of language. But whatever is written must be credible and authentic. Writing cannot be learned but can only be cultivated, and for this critical reading is necessary. The art of writing is like giving birth, in that it is preceded by a period of gestation of ideas, etc. Writing about something new is not always possible, but writing differently of even familiar things is possible. Keeping diary is helpful to a writer. One should have the basic idea of what one wants to write, think of it in terms of structure, and then form a clear picture through visualization. There are some do's and don'ts. Clarity of thoughts and precision of expression are necessary. Overwriting and ever elaboration should be avoided. A touch of humor always enlivens the writing.